Greg, thanks for making the time, man. So everybody, my name is Kia. Thank you for making the time. I am RVP here at Adjust. Fortunate to be joined by Greg, one of my favorite people in the industry who happens to be on my team. Greg, long time no see, man. What's going on?
Long time no see. It's been at least like 30 to 40 minutes. Yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
So Greg, I got to ask, man, where were you when you first heard about iOS 14? What were you doing?
What was I doing, man? I think I was sitting by the pool, drinking a Mai Tai. I dropped the Mai Tai when I heard it was just a big moment in my life. No, but yeah, to be totally honest, I was a little concerned for sure when we started hearing it. Just wondering, hey, I work in attribution. How's this going to affect my day job? So a lot was unclear at the time. It's been an interesting time for this to happen during the pandemic. A lot of us aren't in the office, so you can't have that desk to desk, maybe people making you feel a little bit better. So yeah, I think I was on Twitter, it was on fire, easy to go into full doomsday mode. But yeah, now we're here a year and a half almost later, and feeling a lot better about it for a lot of the reasons that we'll get to today.
Time flies, man. I feel like since iOS 14 launched, user acquisition Twitter is the place to be. You know, a lot of eyeballs.
Greg Wang, 3Gs, follow me for everyone out there.
At Slim Sadie, I have probably 5 followers, mostly family. So Greg, jokes aside, when we think about these new privacy guidelines and how they've evolved and how guidelines have evolved on mobile over the last 10 years, would you say it was kind of easy to understand how we got here? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I wouldn't say it's easy. Like, I think everyone probably would agree that there's been a lot of uncertainty, just trying to read as much as they can, gather as much info. But I think ultimately, and like I'm sure we've all noticed as end users, I'm an iPhone user, I think it's going to be a really positive thing moving forward.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think if you've been following or been in mobile for a long time, it was kind of easy to see that Apple has over the years been really putting user privacy first. So whether it was the deprecation of the UDID in 2012, taken away back, or limited ad tracking being introduced of iOS 10, they've repeatedly put customer privacy and safety in mind, and we really commend them for that. So I would say each time there's been a shift, albeit not as probably drastic as iOS 14, the industry has adapted, which I think is super impressive. And we've seen our colleagues and peers in the industry adapt with iOS 14 too. So I thought maybe what we can do is just take a step back and talk about what actually happened, and then talk about life before iOS 14 and some of our learnings so far, and guide through with some predictions at the end. Sure. So straight up, I would say that the new iOS 14 privacy guidelines mean that app developers must get a user's explicit permission to track them across apps and websites owned by other companies. So I pulled that directly from Apple's privacy guidelines website. So without consent, IDFAs are not readable. And that totally changes the game for iOS attribution and UA strategy and retargeting strategy at large. So before we dig in on those learnings I talked about, Greg, if we were to go back to 2019, you're a performance marketer, what's in your toolbox for acquiring new customers, re-engaging existing ones? What was the landscape like before?
Sure. Circa 2019, and disclaimer because I know we do have a lot of performance marketers on the call who are going to call me on it, but I haven't been a performance marketer. But let's just say circa 2019, this is pre-pandemic, and life was good. So if I'm a performance marketer on iOS, I mean, I've pretty granular access to everything I need to do on a day-to-day basis to really optimize campaigns and do my job to the full extent. You have access to deterministic and probabilistic data through your MMP. Like on the MMP side, you have a waterfall, but you still have that IDFA at the top that you're getting, and making sure that you pretty accurately are able to attribute one user to a specific campaign. And then if you don't have that IDFA, you still have fingerprinting. You can still use IP address, you can still fall back on pretty reliable and pretty accurate sources. So what does that mean on like actual buying? Like on the UA side, you were able to build pretty like in-depth lookalike audiences, taking user attributes really granular, like adjust. And quick plug, we offer 160 just default placeholders of metadata. And so you had access to all of that. You could use all of that to build what does a good user look like for you, and then go out there and just plug and play with some of the biggest networks out there, your Facebooks, your Googles, and then on the programmatic sides, your Liftoffs, your Jamps. You had a lot of opportunity out there to just go out and acquire new users in a pretty efficient way. And then I think even maybe more different now, but in the past on the re-engagement side, you were able to really hone in on your users. And if you wanted to, for example, just get them to stay around, you could do that pretty accurately. So you have suppression lists of full device IDs that, you know, if I'm a gaming publisher, I have maybe this list of 10,000 users that I know are my whales. Those people spend a ton of money, and I know I want to do whatever I can to keep them. Like, you could go out and you had those specific user level device IDs, go give them to a re-engagement partner, tell them, hey, I want to make sure that these people are seeing all of my ads. I don't really care what the bid is. I just want to make sure that these people are staying in my app. So you had the ability to do that. So with now iOS 14, I mean, a lot of what I just explained is still possible. It's just a lot more limited, just with the IDFA being less readily available.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's back to how we can adapt. And luckily, Apple didn't just drop this on us about giving us some alternatives or a means for actually getting consent. So let's talk about that. WWDC 2020, Apple introduced their consent framework, right? Which is basically the method with which developers could ask for tracking permission, like we talked about at the top. And I'm sure most people know that's referred to as the App Tracking Transparency, or ATT. So leveraging ATT as an app developer, it's an opportunity for you to basically have a honest discussion or dialogue with your customers about why collecting device identifiers or tracking them creates a better experience for the customer, why it's integral to your business and the value that you bring to the table. So the transparency in ATT is really what Apple is trying to get at there. Let's have a dialogue and let's give users the control, give them the choice. So when this was launched originally, or when it was announced before enforcement, we, along with others in the industry, started to test consent flows, talk to our customers, understand what it would take to lock in high opt-in rates. And some questions we asked ourselves were like, when's the best time to ask for consent? And our research showed that it's definitely not on first app open, but rather after a customer has had some kind of like aha moment or gratifying moment, at the point at which they realize your app is bringing them value. Completing a level of your game, making a purchase if you're a shopping app, sharing with a good friend, right? And then how do you ask for consent? What's the proper way of doing that? So we've seen customers have the most success when they leverage pre-permission prompts. So essentially an interstitial that they have full creative control over, that they would surface before they actually fire the proper ATT dialog box. So that gives you guys or developers more of a chance to, again, control the look and feel, use your own graphics and branding. You'll have probably more space to communicate why it makes sense for you to gather some data points on the device to create a better experience. And at that point, if a user says that they would like to consent and they agree to it, you can service the ATT dial-in box and likely get a higher opt-in rate once you bring it up. So, taking a step back again, a lot of customers have opted against showing the ATT pop-up at all, which, depending on your vertical, could make complete sense for the business, right? If you're a kids category app, right, and you are by nature COPPA compliant, and how do you, in terms of optics, right, leveraging the pop-up while being COPPA compliant, I think in that case, maybe it makes sense to hold off. But if you were to service it, there are some advantages on the supply and demand side when it comes to UA and retargeting strategy that are going to give you a competitive edge. So On the demand side, this can mean, like you said, Greg, building audience segments, running campaigns of lookalikes, scaling re-engagement campaigns, performing user level marketing analysis, right? So kind of the world of old 2019. On the supply side, it can mean serving personalized ads to your users that'll generate a higher eCPM, not relying solely on contextual advertising. Yeah, so I think that's how I would sum up ATT.
That's a good summary.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I prepped, I prepped.
Yeah, I think consent has been, I think for me, like when we're going through SKAD network and conversion values, but ATT prompts and consent flows were definitely the thing that I've been, I think, most interested in. It's a little bit more high level. It's like, okay, I really get this, and it affects me on like a personal level, because you see these prompts in like live. I've seen some of our clients, I've seen their pre-permission prompts, and it's cool. It's like, okay, hey, I know what they're doing here. This is cool. So yeah, I'd say in general, the way that we've been pushing consent, and I think we've been doing this for like since the start, because I think we saw that realistically consent moving forward is a competitive advantage. No one's gonna get 100% consent, of course, but the more you have, if you have more than your competitor, you have more ability to do pre-iOS 14 marketing campaigns than you were, because you have that consent, and you're not going to have to deal with some of the SKAD network limitations that we can go through later. But with that, I wanted to just show everyone, not just you, Kia, I know you've probably seen it, some of what we've been doing on consent. So we've actually even have a fun name for it. So we call it Project Opt-in, but really the main goal of that has been, okay, how do we minimize iOS 14 disruption? So a lot of that's going to be, okay, you have consent, then you can do everything that you are basically used to doing. And how do you get this consent? So that's where we've been mostly doing a lot of our research. Kia prompted a little bit about like pre-permission prompts, but we have also been working with a lot of our clients. I think last time I heard, our UX team, who's been doing a lot of these opt-in conversations, just to help them make sure that it's not just going to get you high consent, but it's also going to be part of your UX that you're happy with. You want to make sure that your flow, everyone's worked very hard on their onboarding flow and everything. Our UX team's there, and they want to make sure that you're happy with where it is at. And then the second part is just making sure that you're staying compliant. So worst case, you never want to be in trouble with the App Store, ever be rejected. So how do you do that? You just make sure that you're staying on the right side of things, and our team has a lot of good experience there. But we also have built into our SDK now an opt-in flow. So something that we've seen by default, of course, it's going to differ per app, but we've built in something in our SDK that as soon as you implement and adjust, we can help you kind of increase that opt-in and consent flow. So once you get data from this consented users, it comes to you in 4 ways. So I always thought it's like, oh, yes or no, but there's actually a little bit more to it. So there's actually 4 statuses that you can get. So the first is not determined. So this means that the user hasn't seen the pop-up yet. So either you haven't had it you don't have it in your app. Maybe you put it farther down the onboarding flow and the user hasn't got there. Second is restricted. So this is if someone has on the global app settings, if they've gone in and turned off the ability to ask apps to allow to track. Denied is they actually said no. So in the prompt that I'll show next, they actually clicked like do not track. And then lastly, the Holy Grail, you're authorized, everything's good. So when we talk about prompts, so in terms of ranges, we've really seen like there is hope. Like we've had people come in with using a standard prompt, really low opt-in rates, like 3-4%. And as long as, and they did some work, they optimized it. This is just an example of a pre-permission prompt. So before the actual Apple one on the right, you put in your own prompts. Just you can even give some more information about why you want the consent. So if you're a gaming app, hey, I'm a free app. We use ads to supply the experience that you're about to play. That can a lot of times lead to higher opt-in rates, just because people understand, oh, hey, like I'm playing this game, I love it, it is free, so I'll allow this. But another great thing about pre-permission prompts is if they say no or later, you'd still have another chance. So one of the big key parts of the Apple pop-up is if they click ask not to track, that's your only chance to ask that for that per that install. So we always recommend, how do you increase your chances? Just explain a little bit more about why you want it. And then as well as make sure you're using something pre-permission. So if they don't want to give you that access now, at least you still have the ability to ask later in the future. So Kia, you might ask me, Greg, what are the actual consent rates that we're seeing? So I will caveat this with, these are gaming clients who have been seeing a little bit higher of an opt-in rate, but we've been seeing some pretty good results. So some of these are pretty big brand names, and they've seen consent rates, everyone above 25. You'll see a couple that actually have got up to 70. So while 70, I'm sure a lot of you out there are like, oh, wow, if I could get 70, that'd be amazing. I know that's not typically, that's not going to be typical, but we definitely think you can get above 30 for non-gaming apps. That we've seen anywhere from like 20 to 40% is probably what's going to be typical. But yeah, the main message here is use pre-permission prompts, ask for consent. If you have a low consent rate, there are things that you can do to move forward and get a higher rate. So I know we now are, and James, you want to cut back. So you're a performance marketer, consent rates are lower than expected. Not for long, because you're going to start implementing pre-permission prompts. But I'm sure like a lot of you listening now want to know a little bit about SKAdNetwork. So the other side of things. So yeah, Kia, what is SKAdNetwork? It just seems like some crazy acronym.
Man, I can't wait to tell you about this. So Greg, SKAdNetwork, actually, I didn't know this at the time, but it was actually announced by Apple, and it was released in March of 2018. So you've been kind of following the industry closely again. It's like, okay, why would Apple be releasing their own sanction attribution methodology? What's the, there's a little bit of smoke here. And surely enough, with WWDC 2020, SKAdNetwork 2.0 was released, iOS 14 was announced, and we were able to kind of connect the dots on this direction they were going in and creating a more privacy-friendly ecosystem. So first and foremost with SKAD, it's deterministic, so it's 100% accurate. You can use it whether you get consent or not. So it's a great alternative if you, again, are not asking for consent or if you have lower consent rates. They did make some big improvements to it, like I mentioned, in 2020 with 2.0. And there were some announcements just a couple of weeks ago for WWDC 2021, which we'll get into. But first, I'm just gonna be honest, it's a pretty complicated system, especially even we sit within measurement, and we had to spend a good amount of time making sure we understood the inner workings. So before we delve deeper, I wanted to kind of talk about how SKAdNetwork works at large. I'm going to actually go through it first, and then we'll go back to James and show some visuals so that it's really crystal clear. So first and foremost, let's say you are you're a customer of Adjust, and we are your MMP, and we're helping with your SKAdNetwork tracking. So on First App Open, we would actually register your app with SKAdNetwork. So we would call the API, and the method we call is register app for ad network attribution. At that point, assuming you're tracking conversion values with us, which are post-install events supported by SKAdNetwork, as long as a conversion value is triggered within 24 hours, because once we call SKAdNetwork for the first time, a 24-hour timer begins. As long as the conversion value is triggered within 24 hours, we call another method to SKAdNetwork, which is update conversion value. Once that happens, another 24-hour timer starts, and it will continue restarting as long as the conversion value is triggered within that subsequent 24-hour time period. So Once 24 hours goes by with no conversion value update, then, you follow me, Greg? You here? Another 24-hour timer triggers. And if it sounds complicated, again, don't worry about it. That's why people like Adjust are here to help kind of navigate the piping to SCAD network and mapping of conversion values. We make it super easy. So when that last timer ends, Apple SCAD Network attributes the install and conversion values to the winning ad network, right? And at that point, the ad network has done their part as well, and they've called SCAD Network with all relevant view and click information prior to the install. Apple then, again, makes the attribution and shares the payload, aka postback, with the ad network, who then passes that payload after enriching it with some other campaign parameters to the MMP or to the advertiser directly. So that's sort of the flow. And what I want to do now is help you guys visualize that a bit better. So if we go back to James, thank you, buddy. All right, so just to recap, breaking it down, SCAD Network is Apple attribution. It's consent agnostic. So even if you choose not to ask for consent or have less than stellar consent rates, you're in a good spot. It's got 2 timers, which we'll go through shortly, and an attribution payload, aka postback, is sent to an ad network from Apple, which is then sent to the MMP for us to help visualize, or to the advertiser directly if you so choose. So go through this. Awesome. So how does SCAD actually work again? So user clicks on an ad, downloads your app, opens it. At that point, assuming you're working with an MMP like Adjust, we would go ahead and register the app for ad network attribution with the SCAD Network API. Boom, 24-hour timer starts. If no event is triggered after that 24-hour timer expires or prior to expiring, no conversion value is triggered, we'll actually go ahead and send that. Actually, no, sorry, I'm following along here. Another 24-hour timer starts. I should know this. And once that timer expires, we send the final payload over to Apple. Apple makes the attribution. They pass along the payload to the ad network, where the ad network would then enrich the data and it's sent over to Adjust. Second flow, if in the first 24-hour timer timeframe, a conversion value is triggered, then we would kind of loop around until 24 hours expire. We send the conversion value updates to Apple. A new 24-hour timer starts, same process. They send the final payload to the ad network enriches the data, and then sends it over to Adjust. Some examples of what the payloads look like here, just so you guys can get a better feel for this. On the left, you have Apple's raw payload. So that's going to include things like the campaign ID, transaction ID, app ID, which is great. You know, like back in the olden days, Greg, there were ad networks out there where you wouldn't actually be able to have full transparency into the publisher site or the sub-publisher where the install came from. With SCAD Network, that changes. At which point, networks have the opportunity to enrich the data in a way that adds some more parameters that are going to help marketers make decisions on optimizations and just get a better feel for where their installs are coming from. And then, you know, at that point, like we want to talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of SCAD, and it's going to, I'll just say it's definitely going to improve over time as all things do. But one core con that has been coming across our table quite a bit is this idea of potentially duplicated attributions, because you have multiple data sets, right? If you're asking for consent, you would maybe have deterministic attribution data as with pre-iOS 14. If you're using SCAD Network, it's a different data set. It's aggregate data. So let's go through a scenario and we can talk about it together. So all SANs and a lot of major ad networks have already confirmed they can support SCAD attribution. And let's say a user consents on the source app. So the source app meaning where the ad is being placed. Let's say they click on the non-SCAD Network ad from Ad Network X. Let's say they then install and consent on the target app. Again, the app that we are supporting, for example, and the app developer, Zap. From there, attribution will be done on the IDFA and no SCAD Network data is going to be sent. So you're in the clear. But if that user actually clicked or viewed on a SCAD Network ad from Ad Network Y before the install, which was actually driven by Ad Network X, SCAD Network is still going to return a claim to that channel for that same user. which that means the advertiser is going to have to be paying twice, double counting, which is a problem that honestly is still being worked through. And it's something that we hope gets solved with Apple's support. What we're doing on our side to kind of alleviate this for app developers is we're actually not meaning we're not going to be charging for any iOS 14 solutions, and SCAD network attribution volume is not going to count towards the overall volume bucket you've ran with or you've purchased. So that should at least help lessen the load and make it a bit more cost effective. But we're really bought in on helping solve this problem long term because it's an important one. Cool. James, you can stop the shares now, the slide share. Sweet. Yeah, Greg. So I would say that's one of the core cons, but what's your take on like the pros? What are the areas for improvement? What's positive? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
James muted me. He didn't want me to talk. I'm just kidding. For pros, like with all these things moving forward, like there's going to be less uncertainty. And I think that's where a lot of confusion has been leading. And I think the main pro is, hey, it's deterministic, like fully. So, it's coming directly from Apple with pretty much 100% confidence that this install is tied to that source. So that's definitely one positive. And then I think one other positive is that we are super optimistic that SCAD will continue to improve. Apple is an amazing company. They know what they're doing. I think as time goes on and it gets more support industry-wide, I think one really cool thing about iOS 14 has been that the whole industry has, I think, collaborated a lot more than maybe they had in the past. And I think that's been one cool part to see. A lot of people just doing knowledge sharing, just really understanding like how we can move forward. So I think with that, there's been a lot of feedback directly to Apple. And I think there are going to be a lot of positive changes. And at the end of the day, you have MMPs and like Adjust, like we're all here to help you navigate the complexity. I know what Kia went through can be a little bit confusing. So yeah, we are more than happy to help just talk you through it. But yeah, overall, like pros, I think it's going to get a lot better and it's fully deterministic from Apple.
For sure. Let's drill a little bit deeper now on SCAD now that we've got our primer coat on. So what's been coming up with client conversations with me more so recently and with you, I'm sure, is just conversion values at large and what the appropriate strategy is, right? What conversion value should you be tracking? Should you be focusing on revenue events, session events? And we probably have like another hour session on conversion value strategy, but I thought you could maybe give a high level on what we're seeing clients use and when and why.
On here, if you love this, we'll do another one on just conversion values. So yeah, when you look at conversion values, I think what I've been seeing like super high level, and we can get, of course, a lot deeper on like further conversations or if people want to message us one-off. But like when you're looking at SCAD network, like the first 24 hours are definitely the most important. Our chief product officer, Katie, actually just put out a really good blog on this yesterday. So yeah, if you're out there and you want to learn a little bit more, like go to the Adjust blog, and quick plug to read through what Katie said. But when you break it down, you have to really decide on, do you want to focus, like does your app focus more on engagement? So in-app events, registration, sign-ins, or revenue. So if you're looking at revenue, you can use your conversion value models or you can use your conversion values to basically set like revenue ranges. So if you're a subscription company, maybe you have a monthly, you have an annual, you have a free trial, and you want to just use those to determine how valuable a user is, you can just set those. If you're focused on engagement, so a lot of these behaviors that happen within the first 24 hours can really give you a pretty good projection of how valuable a user is. Like, of course, it's not going to be perfect, but you have different activities. You have sessions, you have events, you can use revenue, you can use ad revenue. If you want to focus on, there's more on the engagement side. I'd say just set up your conversion values more focused on the first 24 hours and more focused on your sign-ins and your registrations. And then if you want to focus more on engagement, on revenue, you can just use them for different revenue amounts. And then what we always say with conversion values is definitely be able to test it. Go out there and just test different ones and see what works for you, because you'll be able to observe, hopefully, a pretty clear peak and trough in performance when you're looking at conversion values. Like that's where it would become most valuable for you if you, at the end of the day, are just wanting to see where to put your money. If you are setting up your conversion values correctly, you'll be able to see, okay, maybe this Facebook campaign has really high engagement in the first few days. We know that this is going to be projecting out to a really valuable user long term. So that super high level, break it down by either you want to focus on engagement or revenue. But yeah, we can definitely spend a lot more time on this. So I'll keep it there. And then for further questions, we can definitely answer those later.
Greg, what was your Twitter handle again?
Greg Wang, 3Gs on the end.
Follow that for, we're going to be dropping part 2 exclusively. You got to follow the Greg to know when it's going to be coming. APS vlogs. Okay, so just to recap, we've gone through a lot of content so far. So how do we get here? iOS 14 announced at WWDC in 2020. App developers must get explicit consent from end users to track them across apps and websites owned by other companies. This means IDFA won't be available nearly as often, which impacts performance marketing strategy and mobile measurement in some pretty big ways. App developers should optimize for high consent rates via ATT to gain competitive advantages with mobile UA and retargeting. And then Apple's SKAD network is available as a deterministic, so fully accurate 100% attribution method. The main drawbacks are that it's aggregate and not in real time. But again, we expect to see improvements with SKAD over the years. So how'd I do? It's pretty good?
It's pretty good summary.
Yeah. Okay. Nail me summaries. Okay, so what are the other options for mobile marketers, would you say, when it comes to performance marketing strategy?
So, I mean, from people and folks out there that I've been talking to, like obvious one is shifting some budget to Android. I think a lot of people in the short term are able to do that pretty easily. So I know at one point on the Android announcement, it seems like, yeah, I think right when that came out, everyone's like, oh my God, is this iOS 14? But it's not. It's basically LAT for Android. So it's one step. It's definitely a step towards privacy and something to definitely be aware of. But yeah, it's not the more seismic shift that I see when or that you would see maybe on iOS right now. So you asked about conversion. We're working on this broader project called conversion modeling. It is pretty far along. Like we're doing beta. We have a beta. We have beta clients, and it's really looking into mainly four different areas. So the first is just relative channel importance. So this is just taking okay, how much do you spend on ads? How many installs are you driving from that spend that we're able to see? Which channels are we are driving these? Whether that's on Android, whether it's on consented users. Just looking at this really deeply into, okay, how important is this channel for sources that we can see? How do we model it out for sources that we can't see? So this approach works when you have even no attributed data. So that's very helpful. But it's probably going to be a little bit less accurate than some of the other ones. So we have another one called extrapolation. So this happens with just 10% consent rate. So I know we've seen some people out there are only at like 4 to 5, but we think 10 is definitely reachable for pretty much any app. And if you get that 10, we can just use that to compare data across other networks and then project that attribution data for you. And then another one, so just predictive measurement. So this is more just using machine learning to tie installs back using more of like the device attributes. So whatever we can pick up on the phone in terms of model and OS version, things like that. And then lastly, just behavioral classification. So patterns, events from different networks, and then just use this to just clarify unattributed installs. So yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at like WWDC, I'll throw it back to you then. What was your takeaway from this year's one?
Yeah, I think a lot of interesting things, but a lot of the similar themes as what was announced in 2020. Less so on mobile, but a lot of privacy improvements were talked about on email. So a couple I'll highlight now, which have some measurement implications too. Apple announced mail privacy protection. So this announcement created a lot of buzz. The feature basically helps users prevent senders. So if you receive an email from any company, third-party company, from knowing when you've opened that email. It also can mask the IP address if we're using the Apple Mail app from the iOS Safari browser. So this applies to all iOS 15 Plus devices. And again, this is going to make tracking of email campaigns more difficult given those specific conditions being met. Again, iOS 15, Safari browser, Apple Mail app. But again, a step in the right direction for sure for giving users control, helping them, get a hold on their privacy. The other small piece was hide my email. It's a smaller update, but allows users to share unique random email addresses that forward to their personal inbox anytime they wish to keep their personal email private. So yeah, very interesting. I would say as it relates to mobile marketers and SKAD network, the biggest piece was that Apple is now allowing advertisers to receive payloads, postbacks directly from Apple and not from the ad network, which I think is a huge plus, right? Again, getting that data straight from Apple when you're the one that's actually paying for advertisements and whatnot makes a ton of sense. I think it's going to have some good implications when it comes to potential fraud as well. It still is valuable to get those payloads from the networks because, again, they add the enrichment that maybe is going to help you more with your campaign optimization. But yeah, man, more to come. Hopefully down the line, we'll see an increase in the amount of campaigns that can be ran on SKAD network. I'd love to see a mobile web solution as well, because right now that's a little bit of a hole. But yeah, what about you, Greg? What are you looking forward to? Any predictions? Where are we going to be in a year? Couple
predictions. I would say just like I'm excited for just more adoption on SKAD. Like we've talked about consent a lot. But yeah, I'm very bullish on SKAD and where it's going to go. And then like just alternative options out there. I think the one positive I've been seeing is just like people are getting a lot more creative, like getting back to the basics. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool app campaigns, just so people can diversify and everyone's going to adapt is the main message. But yeah, and Adjust is always here. It's a resource. I'm always here. If you guys need me, either on Twitter, which I've plugged a lot today. I'm not sure if any of you will tweet at me, but yeah, on email as well. But yeah, we're always a resource to talk you through any of the iOS 14 changes and iOS 15 and beyond. But yeah, man.
Yeah, likewise. Really fun being a part of this. It was fun doing this with you. Probably see you in a team meeting later, probably later today. But thanks everybody who listened. Hopefully this was valuable. Again, reach out to us at any point in time if you have more questions. And I wanted to give a shout out to the APS team and James for helping set this up and giving us this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Greg. That was great. Can I just confirm, Greg, your Twitter handle?
Yeah.
You said it's Greg Wang with 3 G's on the end of Wang. Is that right?
That's correct.
And is it an avatar of a person with a kind of sports team around them?
Oh, yeah. So shout out also to Gonzaga basketball, 2022 champions. You heard it here first. But yeah, that's my handle.
Right, I got the right one. Right, we're trying to tag you up with some of your data from there. The 70% tracking permission was a good data point. Well, thank you both. It's a really complex topic. It's been discussed quite a lot, but really enjoyed what you were talking about. You've got great rapport. I'd love to be in one of your team meetings, and yeah, great repartee. And I love what you're saying about the industry collaborating. I think, yeah, that's definitely true. I'd kind of seen it, but not really picked up on it. Everyone sharing their data, working together. I think that's true. That's a really positive thing to come out of this. And I love this idea of being bullish on the SCAD network, and that we're going to see some cool campaigns coming. So I'm really excited for that. And you've given us a lovely positive boost to nearly end this session on. So thank you both, and see you soon.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, James.